Well, I think you have to treat revenue like design sprints. It's not scary, it's iterative. When we first launched Upflex, we started with a simple pay-as-you-go model to test market fit. That worked. It gave us a clear signal that people were interested in this. But then we jumped too quickly into a more complex pricing strategy. So we launched these 5-day passes and 10-day and unlimited, and we didn't actually do the testing on this, and it didn't map to the real usage behavior that we actually saw.
Welcome to another episode of Hold the Churn, the show where we go behind the scenes with the sharpest minds in revenue to decode what's changing, what's timeless, and what actually drives growth in 2025 and beyond. I'm Chandrika, co-founder of Quibbly AI. At Quibbly, we're building AI agents and a data enrichment platform for post-sales teams. We help customers identify and act on signals to expand and retain their existing customers. On this episode of Hold the Churn, we're digging into what it really takes to balance radical user empathy with hard revenue targets, especially when your product sits at the crossroads of SaaS, sustainability, and real estate. Today's guest brings rare clarity to the intersection of product, customer experience, and revenue. Ginger Dhaliwal is the co-founder and chief product officer at Upflex. She's worn every hat from product strategy to go-to-market, always anchored in deep customer empathy. And I'm lucky to call her a friend and a mentor. Ginger, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chandrika. It's so lovely to be on your show, and it's wonderful to see how Quivly is growing and expanding. And I'm so lucky to call you guys a, a vendor
Yes,
now too.
we've been very fortunate to collaborate with you in the earliest days. So, Ginger, before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit about Upflex and where are you working from today?
That's a good question. So Upflex is we started off as a marketplace in 2017, so really early days before COVID. And essentially, what we do today, we started off as a marketplace, but today we're really focused on helping companies with their hybrid strategy, whether it's in their own corporate offices or they need to unlock the network of spaces around the world. When we think about the way companies work, nowadays, they have distributed teams all around the world. We're in over 125 countries, 11,000 spaces. Think WeWork, IWG, they're all on our platform. We're so lucky to have amazing co-working partners like that. And our goal is to provide access to space to close to where people live, but also provide the ability for people to access their own corporate offices on one platform. So we're we're thrilled because in a lot of what we build, in whether it's starting from when you're building a startup, timing is everything. And so 2017, when we went out to the market, people were like, what are you talking about? And then COVID hits, and now everyone kind of resonates and understands that people can work from anywhere. So we're thrilled to be on this journey at this stage
Yeah,
and at this time. Yeah.
it's been really exciting to see Upflex grow, and you're right. Timing is everything in startups. They say bad markets make even great founders look average or below average, and great markets look subpar. Founders look amazing. So timing
That's
is
right.
everything. Ginger, you've worn so many hats as a co-founder, especially as a product leader, driving growth for the company. When a big decision hits your desk, what's the one lens you always apply first?
Being a product and being in the product role for the past 20 years with various products, the first thing is I ask two questions. Does this create clarity for the user? And does it create real revenue value for the business? That's been my lens from the beginning, and it's become even more critical as we've scaled. I've always used a framework of stay close to the problem, right? We're here to solve problems. That's why we're building this tech. Test early and learn fast. Um, but the biggest shift over time has been moving from instinct. So, when we first started off Flex in 2017, we saw the data. The data was demonstrating that most people were losing about 15 days of their lives commuting into the office. And
Wow.
companies in 2017 were also thinking about their real estate differently. So again, timing was perfect. And then we landed with working with the Nokia innovation team. And they provided, if you listen really clearly to your stakeholders or potential customers, they will often tell you their friction and their pain points. And so, we started with a hypothesis, but we really went out and validated that quickly. And then we built basically prototyping and went back to our potential clients and asked them, would this solve your problem? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to solve people problems, right? Are you making people work faster, more efficient? Are you creating that engagement that they need in the data that they need in order to be successful in their role within the company? So a lot of that, really understanding that clarity of the user, and then understanding how do we, as a company like Upflex, build a solution that people are willing to pay for. So there's a lot of layers that go into it, but I think a lot, coming from a product standpoint, I always have that iterative approach to how we build things, and it's kind of led down some really amazing sort of insights and the ability to build a product that people are interested in using, which is often what you're looking for, right? For me, it's like if you build a feature and no one uses it, it drives like it's like heartbreaking. So I want to build products that people want to use.
Yeah. No, for sure. Um, Ginger, you mentioned, working with the Nokia innovation team. When you're a young startup, when you're early, you can do a lot of things that don't scale, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of the notion. How do you evolve from that into a more repeatable approach, repeatable product that scales as you mature from being a startup to a scale up?
That's a fantastic question. I think, a lot of it, again, in our world, we have different stakeholders. And so, understanding the pain point of the different stakeholders. So when we started, we were a marketplace, and so we had our supply partners, which are co-working partners. Um, they had to play game, like they had to want to do this. Um, then we had our direct customers, right? The IBMs, the Zooms of the world, and the Nokias. And then we have our commercial real estate partners that actually sit in the center as well, because they actually hold the relationships. And so when we were thinking of, building this product from the beginning, we had to provide value to all of those players within that stack in order to be able to kind of scale, and we had to do it quickly. So in many ways, we had so we built 4 products in 4 months. So we had a mobile app, we had the business portal, the back end system to manage everything, and then um, uh, yeah, so it was essentially 4, and we had 4 months to build it because we needed to get something that was minimally viable for all of those different stakeholders and get it into market as quickly as possible, and then start testing and making sure that we can iterate on that. And so we had this incredible backlog of things that we wanted to build, but we knew that we needed to get to that MVP product that we can get to market, because scaling only happens once you get a product into market. Scaling doesn't happen when you're still conceptualizing something and trying to get to that, 200 backlog, and you're getting to like, okay, I need to get to 200. Our thought process is like, what's that minimal viable product that people are willing to start testing and using? And how do we get there very quickly? And that time crunch was really painful initially, but I'm so thankful because it got the product out there, and then we could start iterating with all the different stakeholders, and we had and it's much easier to scale when you're doing that. But at the same time, we needed to build the marketplace plus the demand. And that's always challenging, right? We had to convince our supply partners, hey, we're going to bring you new type of demand that never existed before. And in many ways, they saw it as a competition. And so there was a lot of education, lots of time spending in reassuring them how our business model was different. And so once we scaled our supply partners and we had, the multiple countries that we needed to, the demand came much easier because it became very clear when we entered into this market, there wasn't a centralized database where you could go to that had all the co-working options around the world. And so that was like a really unique um, moat that we created when we first launched because we knew that we wanted to be global, and by centralizing all this information, and companies were already looking for space in multiple markets, but they had to do so much of the legwork to really get there. We were already easing that burden by centralizing everything together. Um so yeah, I mean, scaling is hard, but you got to get the product out first. And then you can start thinking about the other friction points that you can solve for, right?
Absolutely. Especially with marketplaces requiring, you to sort of build four different products, I guess, in 4 months. That must have
Yeah.
required quite the discipline and a lot of balance to strike.
Oh, absolutely. But what we did was we spent at least 8 months beforehand conceptualizing what we needed to build, and we prototyped everything. So thank God for Figma, because I don't know what we'd do without Figma. But I mean, it was back then, it was Sketch, I think it was called. Figma was just starting. And so we were able to prototype so people could understand the end result, but they knew the steps that were required. And so a lot of conversations with all of yeah, with all our stakeholders, we had like at least 10 to 20 companies that we could go to help us really conceptualize this and make sure that we were building the right thing um, once it was out
Yeah,
and solving the right pain points.
makes sense. Well, sticking to the theme of balance, Ginger, you exhibit this rare skill of zooming in and out at the right times. I've rarely seen a lot of product leaders have this skill. It's really hard to develop, and I deeply admire this. You champion both user empathy and business outcomes. So, tactically speaking, how do you balance what's best for customers with what's best for revenue?
Luckily, I have a background in social work. So I have incredible patience and incredible listening skills because it's always you know, one of my first experience, I've been doing product and building product for the past 25 years, but prior to Upflex, I actually was involved with a healthcare coordination platform, and we built the most amazing product, right? We spent, I think, 3 years in development, and we spoke to a lot of people. And then once we got the product into market, it was really heartbreaking because it was I think it was 2010 when we built the product. And it had all your biometric, your sensor data at a cloud. We were the first cloud SaaS product out there. And we thought our end customer was the family member. And when we went out and tried to sell this to family members, it was $99 to keep your mom and dad safe at home longer instead of putting them in a facility. And we just couldn't find the buyer. And I was shocked because I was like, oh my God, you have everything that you need. And so many of us our parents live in a different city and we can't physically be there. And so I honestly believed in the mission and the problem we were solving. And when we were speaking to family members, they're like, yes, yes, yes. And then when we launched, we just couldn't get the traction. Also, doing B2C is really, really hard. And and so I had all the empathy. I built the best product, but then I couldn't get a buyer to buy, and we had to pivot. And it became very clear, we didn't spend enough, even though when we were interviewing these stakeholders, we weren't probably asking the right questions. And sometimes, the stakeholders will, it's, the common story if you ask someone if they want a faster like back in the day, faster horse versus a car, they can't even imagine what a car would look like, right? And so oftentimes when you are speaking to your stakeholders, you kind of have to help them imagine what that new version of what they're doing would look like, because they're so stuck in the way that they're doing something now, and they can't actually visualize or conceptualize that. And anyways, with the healthcare stuff, we did eventually find a buyer, which was the hospitals, because it was a it was a painkiller for them, whereas for the families it was a vitamin. And similar to Upflex, when we first launched, a lot of people saw us as a vitamin, not a painkiller. And so figuring out what that painkiller is was really, really hard for us. And COVID happened, and the way that companies were thinking about their real estate, we became a painkiller, and so they're willing to pay for that. And that was one of the lessons that I've learned, in this journey, figuring out how to be a painkiller, instead of, a vitamin.
That's a hard lesson to learn. And I think every startup needs to at some point. And a lot of founders obviously get tripped up in figuring out how to be that painkiller, even though they may have, as you said, with the healthcare startup, you had the best product out there. You just couldn't get it to become that painkiller for the end consumers, but you found the buyer in hospitals eventually. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn. Yeah.
it was. I mean, $10 million and then selling for parts afterwards. So yeah, it was hard.
Yeah. Well, let's zoom out to the market you all operate in. Now, Upflex sits at the intersection of real estate, sustainability, SaaS. With that many stakeholders, what's your mental model for building products everyone can rally around?
Uh, yeah, actually, it's interesting. So when we were building the application, there's common components. So think of it as a modular component, right? So there's modular things that you're building for, but then you have an application layer that can be used by different stakeholders, right? So, everyone needs single sign-on. It doesn't matter if it's a co-working partnership or a partnership with our commercial real estate brokers. So it's always figuring out what is common and modular for all of the different stakeholders, whether it's the corporate admins at a client, the users and employees, the commercial real estate brokers, the space partners. From an infrastructure, what's common, and then what are the different applications that they need, that would be unique to them, right? For example, reporting is something that is across the board for every um, stakeholder, right? They just need reporting to be filtered based on their unique needs, right? So the infrastructure that you build has to be flexible enough that you're building the infrastructure and you're filtering based on the different stakeholders. So a lot of our the work that we do from a product and revenue standpoint is figuring out that sort of layer that's common, and then the customization that doesn't change the infrastructure layer, but maybe the application layer becomes a little bit more dynamic based on the data and the workflows that that stakeholder needs, and then understanding what is the pain point that you're solving for, right? For space partners, we're solving for real-time integration. Um, where they have inventory and they can get their listings into our system, right? We've used the same sort of methodology for our corporate clients offering their own real estate to their own employees, right? So we were able to take components that we've built here, apply it to another use case here, and now we have another opportunity to reuse some of that modular components, but then have a different pricing model, where we're actually, that's a cost to us, and now we've turned it into a revenue. So a lot of our kind of, even though we have all these different stakeholders, we're able to think of our platform in that way, so that we're not rebuilding stuff, but kind of, um, having more modular components that can be reused in different ways with our different stakeholders, and that allows us to monetize differently.
Got it.
Did that
And
help? Did that answer it? Yeah.
yeah. And internally, I'm curious, how have you aligned the organization to sort of be on top of the customer needs from all these different perspectives?
I it is hard being a marketplace, but the interactions. I think understanding the interactions of the different workflows and understanding what people are responsible for, right? For corporate admin, they care about cost and they care about um, how to make their work easier, right? Employees, they're looking for collaboration opportunities and they're looking for a frictionless booking experience, right? Um, so understanding each of those values is really important, and mapping it out clearly is, I think, what we try to do in the product. But again, reusing as many of those components as possible wherever possible. Um, yeah.
Now, speaking of effective collaboration, Ginger, you've been a core partner for us at Quivly from our earliest days. What convinced you that sort of our problem and the thesis around tying usage to revenue and having clear sort of, signals to understand where customers were finding value, how do you grow that, was worth solving? And how did you champion that internally at Upflex?
So I think initially when we think about like the evolution in revenue, especially for software, it started with like the enterprise model where people bought per user per license model, right? And then we went into this, and you had something that got downloaded onto your computer and it was restricted. And then we had the SaaS approach where people were like, okay, it was easy to count, right? Where you could go in and say, okay, this user, you pay this amount for. I think the evolution and where we're going is, the consumption model. And that's what I really loved what you guys were building is how do you take consumption, tie it to customers in a way that is trackable and transparent, because that consumption model today is really hard to track. And I don't think companies like Stripe do it. Stripe is a payment gateway. It's not, and I think that's where a lot of people get confused is on the back end, you need to be able to report. And we actually have lots of different business models that we use with our clients. So some of our clients have an on-demand business where they're paying a booking fee, etc. And then other clients have a reduced booking cost, but then they're paying per user amount. And then we have another layer of that where some companies are paying in arrears. Managing all of that, you can't do that in NetSuite and QuickBooks or Stripe. That's not what they were designed for. And I think the way that you guys are thinking about bringing all those data points into a centralized location and being able to track and make predictions of revenue growth was something that I thought was really amazing because I hadn't seen that in the market.
Got it. And and was there any resistance internally when you first started talking about using Quivly or bringing us on as vendors for solving some of these issues that you highlighted?
Yeah, well, a lot of the data that is required to solve these problems, there's compliance issues, right? And so we figured out a workaround where the data isn't being stored in the cloud environment, but in our infrastructure. And I think that made the biggest difference because a lot of this data is taking what people are using in the product and that the people who are using the product there's all these compliance and regulatory requirements and being able to continue to off not have get the information without having access to that kind of data layer outside of our controlled systems was really important for us.
Got it. Yeah. And that's a totally reasonable ask. And we completely, understand that. That's why we've been focused on embedding ourselves into our customers' sort of native environments rather than trying to get them to step out of their workflows and adopt a net new tool. Uh,
Exactly.
One of the things you mentioned, Ginger, was around creating sort of a single place for all of this, a single source of truth, if you will. What's actually worked for you to get teams like customer success, product, finance, who often look at usage and revenue through different lenses on the same page?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of this data, I think this is where it becomes really challenging because most companies, as a tech stack, they have, lots of different products that they're using, right? They are using a CRM tool, then they're using a intercom, for example, for their CX stuff. And then they have probably their own custom made platform. And so what we've had to do is we've had to pipe all of that into a data layer, Redshift in our case, to then be able to start slicing and visualizing the data in a way that allows us to all have one kind of dashboard that we're working on and making sure that we're looking at the usage and spend and all of that in one central location. It it's a heavy lift because you actually need to make sure that, every time the engineering team makes a change to the product, it doesn't cut off that data pipeline, or, Zoho or HubSpot or Salesforce upgrades their system and that data pipeline cuts. So there's this constant, like, making sure that the data pipelines are up to date and pulling correctly, but we do have to have someone within the team constantly monitoring all of those pipelines to make sure we're getting the data flow in, but we're, as a team, using the same dashboards to make business decisions, and we're looking at that on a regular cadence, to kind of move the company forward. And, in our world, too much data, which I learned sometimes, and we make this data also visible at a client level, and is sometimes the data, um, can, from a client perspective, get the client thinking about optimizing on the wrong thing. So, for example, we have clients, we have day passes for desks, and now they want hourly desk passes too. And you're just like, okay, no, we shouldn't be optimizing for that. But that's what data does. You have good data, and companies can figure out like other ways to optimize on their revenue differently.
Yeah, no, super helpful. I think, again, there's a balance to be struck there with being data informed versus going data crazy. And I feel like you guys have done a great job of striking that balance.
Yeah, yeah, and we as a company, we have 54 people across 16 countries. So math is sometimes the easiest language to communicate, right? These numbers, people know when something's going up or down. And so being data driven is actually a really great way to get everyone aligned, especially when you have such a diverse team.
Yeah. Speaking of numbers going up and down, when you're launching new initiatives, Ginger, whether it's trying a new pricing model or launching new features, how do you test what the impact is going to be on revenue and whether it is going to drive revenue behavior?
That's a great question. So, a lot of what we think about is, is this going to increase bookings? Is it going to drive upsell? Is it going to improve retention? And is it going to boost our margin? Those are the questions that we ask often. And for example, we're now thinking about introducing a new sort of um, events management feature within the product. And And so we had to look at the macro trends. Why are people wanting to have event management? It was something that was requested by our clients. And then the question is, what's the cost of building it versus the upsell opportunity, right? And is it going to improve retention? And is there a way to charge for it, right? So there was all these questions that we had to ask when we were building this feature, and it became very clear that it definitely would have increase opportunity for bookings because people in order to have bookings you need to have a purpose, and the purpose is events, to drive people back into the office. A lot of companies are now trying to experiment with events. So events is definitely something that we need to build on, and it creates probably more retention. But as a feature, we have the ability for people to book our own offices, our network, but spaces outside of our network where we don't get any benefit of the revenue. And so, but from a user standpoint, it allows the user to have all of that feature set within the product itself. So it increases the total value of the product. So these are all the questions that we have to kind of run through when we're thinking about building a feature, to really think about the cost. Is it going to increase the bookings? Is it going to drive upsell? Is it going to improve retention? But is it also going to increase the stickiness of people wanting to use the product? Because if you can drive stickiness and people coming back more frequently, then you figure out how to create like something that it becomes a painkiller, for a lot of people because it's centralized. So those are things that we constantly have to weigh out when we're thinking about building new features.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes even after having weighed all of this in, the data tells us otherwise when you've launched a feature,
Yeah.
and to kill your darlings sometimes. So, can you tell me about a time when you had to kill a feature or a process that you loved and you were personally, very excited about, but didn't really perform the way you'd expected?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's I was one of the features that we were looking at was this concept of hub and spoke, meaning more companies will take on real estate closer to where people live, and it would be a smaller footprint. So it'd be like maybe a 10-person private office for 25 people in Scarsdale, for example, or Princeton in the suburb, right? And with a co-working partner. And so the idea was that, why not get a small office that you can control and then allow people to come, and when make them book the space before they came so that you could control, but you're instead of paying for 25 people, you're paying for 10 people, for example. So there's cost savings there. And it turned out that people didn't like to book their own offices. And so it became a feature that we built within the product, but it just didn't get the stickiness. And and so we had to kill it. And the other so we had to kill that feature, which was really but what we did do was we understood based on that learnings how to build the feature of enabling the fact that you have these corporate offices or these hubs, and you dynamically have people coming in where they don't have to make a booking. So it led us down a new path where we can use AI to understand patterns as opposed to actually having the friction of people book. And so even though we had to kill that feature, it was a good learning lesson to some of the more advanced features that we're building today.
Got it. And how
Yeah.
did you have to sort of steer the team in the right direction, or how did the team react when, something that they had, put a lot of thought and effort into building was going to be rerouted or, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think this goes back to the fact that we're very iterative. So when we build to execute at that minimal level. It's I say it's like building a house, and you start building like a portion of a room and then you build out the bathroom and the closet and stuff. So we're really good at building like the outline of a room and testing something and then figuring out how to make it more robust over time. And so, these features take us, we're very quick at this point in launching features with that minimal viable, like, okay, what do we need to build? And then how do we create the backlog to move quickly if we see the stickiness of this? And so it's constantly making those kind of trade-offs.
Yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense. Let's land the plane with some advice for founders, Ginger. What advice would you give to product-led founders who want to get more confident with revenue, pricing, go-to-market decisions?
Well, I think you have to treat revenue like design sprints. It's not scary, it's iterative. When we first launched Upflex, we started with a simple pay-as-you-go model to test market fit. That worked. It gave us a clear signal that people were interested in this. But then we jumped too quickly into a more complex pricing strategy. So we launched these 5-day passes and 10-day and unlimited, and we didn't actually do the testing on this. And it didn't map to the real usage behavior that we actually saw. People don't book our product, they book 1.5 times a month. And so we had a, a product that didn't kind of match the real usage and behavior. And that was a really expensive exercise because building those products within with those revenue opportunities within the product is really, really challenging. And then for the next 2 years, we sold it. And the next 2 years, we had to spend time ripping it out and having a more flexible pricing model. And now we have not only our marketplace, but we also have the ability to book your own corporate offices within the platform. So we're constantly evolving and testing these pricing strategies. Our sales team goes out and does a lot of that testing. Initially, we have to do it manually outside of the system. And that's where Quivly becomes really important. Um, and then once we see traction, then we build the complexity within the product to support it. But I think treat revenue like experiments, and it's more iterative than landing on something because I think we're still going to be experimenting with different pricing models, and it's not one and done thing, it's constant.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. One of my favorite features slash a space that we can book on Upflex is I didn't realize we can book like airport lounges or workspaces in airport lounges, which is super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we have a partnership with Priority Pass and Dragon Pass in
yeah,
Asia. And so it's wonderful. Yeah. And it's paid by your company.
yeah, that's incredible. Uh,
Yeah.
Ginger, this has been amazing. Is there anything we haven't gotten to that you wish we would have covered today?
Oh no, I think the questions were so thoughtful. I appreciated them. People forget that product is about revenue at the end of the day. And a lot of our time is spent making sure that we're listening to our customers and also understanding the macro trends, right? A lot of business models today, especially in SaaS, are kind of rethinking how they need to be thinking about their business models. So I think, when we think about revenue, it's you're constantly experimenting just like product people are. And I didn't really appreciate that until I got your questions and I was like, wow, yeah, it's true.
I'm glad some of these were thought provoking.
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed the chat, Ginger. Where can listeners learn more about you and Upflex?
Well, please feel free to, if you want some free day passes, you can get in touch with me. But Upflex.com, it's UPFLEX.com. And then Ginger at Upflex is where you can reach me. I'm also on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Well, thanks, folks, for hanging out on Hold the Churn. If you enjoyed the episode, drop us a review and share it with a friend who needs a revenue reality check. Until next time, thanks, Ginger. Bye.
Thank you, Chandrika. Bye.